All right, in this lesson we're going to talk about manufacturer's costs. In particular, we're going to talk about three manufacturer's costs, and they are direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. So let's start with direct materials. Direct materials are tangible components of a finished product. So here's a finished product, the pen. The tangible components would be things that my customer gets to take after they purchase it. So if my customer purchases this pen, the direct material, the tangible component of this finished product is the plastic, the felt at the top, and the ink. Okay? So if we were talking about, what's the direct material cost of this pen? Well, whatever it costs to put this plastic on here, the felt on there, and then the ink. So that's direct materials. Now, direct labor is defined as efforts of employees who physically convert materials into finished products. Now, they physically convert them into a finished product, which means that they touch them during the manufacturing process or they're part of the manufacturing process. We talked about we might have a situation where we have a manager or we might have a line worker. Well, the line worker is actually physically converting them into finished product. Whereas a manager may not. They're overseeing it, but they're not actually converting it into a finished product. An example would be a line worker who's putting the cap on this pen, and that's all I do. Cap on the pen, and maybe they place this into a box, and the box gets sent to the packaging department. Well, that employee is physically taking two raw materials, they're really raw materials or goods in process, and putting the cap on them, making them the finished product. So those employees that are responsible for converting the goods from raw materials to finished good, that's what we would call direct labor. Okay? They're directly associated with the labor needed to convert this product from raw materials to finished goods. And then finally we have manufacturing overhead. Another way that you can think of this is factory overhead or indirect overhead. I like to use manufacturing overhead. Manufacturing overhead is costs that are not direct materials or not direct labor. So it's kind of like a catch-all. The way that I think about this really is it's an indirect cost of producing the product. Indirect cost of producing the product. It still is needed in order to produce the product. An example of manufacturing overhead is machinery depreciation. Now, if you don't remember what depreciation is the systematic allocation of cost over a period of time in order to match the revenues to the expenses of the machine. An example would be I buy a machine, the machine's good for, let's say, 5 years, and I buy it at $100,000. I'm not going to expense $100,000 in year one. Instead, I'm going to expense $100,000 over its life, 5 years, so I'm going to expense $20,000 a year. By expensing it $20,000 a year, I'm depreciating it over time. Okay? That depreciation goes under manufacturing overhead. I do need that depreciation or I do need that equipment, but it's not directly associated as labor and it's not directly associated as materials. It's indirectly associated as a manufacturing overhead. So again, we've got three manufacturing costs in managerial accounting. They are direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead. We said that direct materials are tangible components of a finished product. We said that direct labors are efforts of employees who physically convert materials into finished product. And then factory overhead is kind of that catch-all. If it's not direct materials, it's not direct labor, it's manufacturing overhead. Now, one thing to note, that all of these have to be product costs, not period costs. If they are period costs, it doesn't matter if they're direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead. Granted, they probably wouldn't even be direct materials or direct labor, but they couldn't be put into manufacturing overhead because they are a period cost, and period cost needs to be expensed when incurred rather than capitalized when it occurs. Okay? So direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead, those are the three manufacturing costs.